What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is the founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners, Bob Glazer. Bob built a $20 million business recognized as a best place to work by Inc., Fortune, Forbes, and Glassdoor. The leadership lessons he has shared in his books and in his wildly popular Friday Forward newsletter inspires many around the world. I have my notepad ready. I'm ready to be inspired, and I hope you are too.
Some people call the people in their business we're a family. I think it's really dangerous to say that because some people, the drunk uncle at the wedding, no one tells them to stop being so handsy. Like, that's not what you're trying to do. If you are 1 for 10, 3 games in a row, you're going to get benched because you're hurting the team. That's the difference between team and family. So what is the higher order principle that the team is working towards, where they believe that not dribbling the ball the whole game hurts the team and doesn't get them to the goal?
Bob, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Don.
I know how much you enjoy sports. I've loved the way that sports have played a role in your adult life. Tell me about sports as a child.
I played a little bit of everything, mostly basketball, soccer, and baseball. I was always very involved in teams. I think learned about winning and losing. I was never the best at anything, but I think that's carried over to adulthood. It was like I would figure out how to do it and get good enough. I remember I was pretty good pitcher in Little League, and I had one of those games where I was just like in the zone, striking out everyone. And I mean, I just remember what an awesome feeling that was. Like, I was a fine pitcher, but whatever happened that day, it was just like I was in the zone. I remember that 1 or 2 times from tennis too, just being so in that zone when you feel invincible. And it shows you how there's a mental, physical flywheel that goes on that either can become a vicarious circle or a vicious circle for you.
That's a great way to put it. It is true. There's been great research and studies around flow.
Yeah. Those like top 1% flow where it's all clicking, you're in the zone and you feel invincible.
As no one has managed, we wish we could figure out how to stay in that zone more often or for longer strings of time.
And then there's the opposites. I actually watched the finals of, I guess it's called Roland Garros, not the French Open. I was learning they don't like it called the French Open. But Tsitsipas, I think he was really getting frustrated at himself and was like yelling at himself, which if I'm the other player watching the person yell at themselves, I'm starting to get confidence that I'm in their head.
Right.
Like, I got this guy where I want him.
Oh, yeah. And Djokovic lost the first 2 sets, and then he started to come back and became unstoppable. What struck me, and the reason why I was so looking forward to having you as a guest today, is that you've been real open in much of your own work and your own writing and some of your conversations about the journey of playing sports with your children and about some of what it has taught you. I loved some of what you've written, some of what you've had a chance to say in the past. Tell me about some of these lessons and the things that you're learning while trying to both teach and compete against your own children.
When you think about a sports coach, they cannot step on the court. You can never go grab the ball or otherwise. And I think a lot of us want to just, as parents or leaders, step in and take the ball and show them how to do the shot or make the pass. And that's not the right thing to do. So first of all, I will say I am not a big fan of most parents in sports these days because I think they make it about themselves and their childhood and are living it out through their kids. And I do not want to be that. And I want to be as far of that as possible. Also, you don't know if you like swinging a bat before you pick it up. So we kind of had hey, you're going to try this. We're going to sign up. You got to fight through a little pain of learning something to see if you like it. Otherwise, very few people pick up something and just fall in love with it from the first 5 seconds. We always put our kids in different stuff, try different stuff, see what they like, didn't like, but we never pushed them if they didn't like it. I mean, we pushed them to get to the sort of moderate level of skill to see if they liked it. But then at that point, and I think this is where a lot of the parents are overdoing it. If you want kid to be great or really engage in something or like it, they've got to like it. At some point, the intrinsic motivation needs to kick in or otherwise. So I think there's that lesson of you try something, you commit to it, you see it through. You don't have to do it again, but you don't quit in the middle.
Mhm.
You see it through, you go to your commitment, you go to your practices, and healthy competition is important. I think learning how to win well, lose well. I think one of the stories you're alluding to is my 15-year-old son in basketball. He should have beaten me a long time ago. He's just too scrawny. Like he's about the same height as me, but I probably have 50 pounds on him. Now that we're close, like I'm not letting him win. I'm playing like my heart out because once he beats me, I'm never going back. And I don't want people to think I'm a knock. When he's 6 years old, I wasn't swatting him out of the thing and beating him 21-0. He goes, so when we got into the age where he could start to compete, I started to play him for real. I remember that moment. To me, like something well earned, and a lot of things aren't earned anymore, is like when he beats me, he's going to have real satisfaction. In fact, even tennis, he's on the high school tennis team this year. I actually just started playing tennis again. He'd been playing for a month and I hadn't played for school. I'm like, he's probably going to beat me now. He got up on me like 2-0. I saw the twinkle in his eye. I saw I got him now. And I proceeded to crush him 6-3 in that. Not today. Again, I'm holding on for dear life. Like I'm giving him a good run for his money and he's going to win soon. And probably I'm not going to win again. And he's going to feel like he earned that.
I love the whole "not today"
Yeah.
when you talked about playing him in one-on-one in basketball, and that was one of my favorite reads. When he does beat you, he will know it won't be something where there's no participation trophy when he beats you.
Yeah. I do not believe in participant. Gen X gets not enough credit or awareness. Gen Xers were never about participation trophies. That was all the boomers did that with millennials. And most of the Gen Xers have shut that down that I know who are parenting the Gen Z people.
Well, so now we both agree there are some great lessons that sports teaches. Are there some lessons that you've learned while working with Max, for example, that you're trying to make sure he's taking from the competitive opportunity?
Yeah. I mean, it's clear like hard work versus talent. A lot of times hard work beats talent, particularly when talent doesn't work hard. My son had tryouts yesterday for the placements next year. And I always say to them before tryouts, they will remember the kid who was running hardest during tryout.
Right.
You should run and fight for everything until you are exhausted because there's 100 kids there with numbers on their back and you're trying to stand out. So again, even if you have the most talent at a tryout, probably generally not a good idea to be the person working on the low end of the hard work spectrum.
Yeah. We just went through tryouts. My daughter's playing some basketball, and I was talking to her about, you play defense, you pass the ball well, and you scrap for loose balls, and the coach will remember you.
Right.
Won't matter if you scored not a single point. As things ended, that's exactly what the coach remembered about her. And I thought, there you go. I get the coach actually in on my side now too. That's really great.
Yeah.
But skiing is one of those things that you do an awful lot with your children. I understand in one of the ski seasons recently, on the last weekend, you all had signed up to run a race course, and everybody was trying every day to try to push yourself to a better time. How did that effort to constantly be looking at what we did yesterday, not good enough, translate into some things you were trying to maybe achieve for yourself, but also teach your own children? I know you actually used it as a lesson in some of what you're trying to teach the rest of us.
Yeah, skiing has always been more of a family activity for us. So, ironically, like our fall and spring, like a lot of families, there's a lot of sports, a lot of running around, different tryouts, different places. 3 kids. My wife and I are often dividing and conquering. Versus like skiing is we get in the car on Friday, we drive up to New Hampshire. It's our family, activity. But there's a lot of lessons I think in skiing too around mental versus physical. Even when my daughter was younger, I was like, gets a little icy. I'm like, you have the tools to ski through this. You're just mentally seizing up and you're forgetting the tools that you had. So I don't do with my wife or else I won't be married. But with the kids, I always push them on something that was a little, again, in a safe way. We're not blasting down it, but a lot of these things, they're very clear, like mental versus physical challenge. Clearly it's physical, but a lot of times it is just literally psyching yourself out when you actually have the physical skills to do it. The way to get through ice in skiing is just to ski through it. What does everyone do? They go sideways, put themselves on edge, seize up, which is just a mental reaction versus just using the tools that you have to go through it.
I love that.
So, yeah, when we go skiing, one place we go skiing out west, they have this NASTAR thing. You buy a bunch of tickets, and we all had sort of this time. But what was interesting was we're all different times, and my kids gotten faster as they're younger. So, like the younger kids are beating the older kids because they just have more time on skis from the time that they were 2 or 3. But no one was focused on what the other person's time was. The focus was, could you beat your own time? What could you do better? Like, and that was my focus too. Like, there was a level of a medal, but I just really wanted to beat my time. Like, it's, to me, these things are all good to like have a goal, think about what you need to do to get there. If you get there, it's awesome. If you don't get there, it's not the end of the world, but what could you have done? The thing about ski racing is you can compete against other people or you can compete against yourself. Competition is not about beating other people or winning them. It's about raising the level of effort for everyone.
And there's a great business lesson in that too.
Yeah, exactly. I tell a story as part of our cultural onboarding. Our management team was doing an offsite. We had paid for 2 rounds of bowling. We all bowled and everyone's getting a little tired, but we had a whole another set that we paid for. So I said, look, $20 to whoever wins the next round. Everyone bowled 30% better the next round. It was just upping the competitions. Like I said, I was never an elite athlete. I am not a winning's everything. I just think when we compete healthily, we raise the level of competition within ourselves. Look at Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Pearl Jam, Nirvana. When these great new transformations came, there were usually a couple key people raising the game for everyone in the industry. And be an industry without competition, and you'll probably see a pretty lazy, monopolistic business.
It's funny. I just finished a book with Jack Nicklaus' son. And while talking to Jack about his competitive fire and how it was fueled so much by when Arnold Palmer was on the same course with him. This is way back. But to your point, iron sharpens iron. You get better when you've got a worthy competitor.
The most enlightened yoga teacher in the world competes for a spot against another yoga teacher to teach at a in-demand studio.
Right.
We can pretend it doesn't exist, but exists. One of the things I am more on my kids around than winning the game or losing is winning well and losing well. I've been in soccer games where kid goes for a breakaway, does a shot, the parents on one team, the other team, goalie makes an unbelievable save. And all the parents of the goalie's team are cheering, nice save. And everyone else is like, oh, crap. No, the answer was nice save, goalie. Like, it wasn't a bad shot. It was a nice play.
Yeah. I love that. And at the end of the day, we're better when there is that opportunity to push us to get someplace and compete against ourselves.
We're better when we compete against ourselves, even if there's no one else. The top performers compete against themselves. They just set a metric. This goes to my book, Elevate. We all have more capacity than we think. And this doesn't have to be sports or anything. You artificially just put your marker here. So what's going to push you to go here if you just leave it here and no one pushes you on it?
Right. So we've talked a little bit about business and that you're an author, Elevate, and that you also run a pretty amazing company. What advice would you give to younger folks who are reaching out to you and say, I want one day to be an entrepreneur. I want to be able to kind of be the master, the captain of my own ship and the master of my own fate.
It's only sexy in the rearview mirror. That's what I say about entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur is like, I see the mountain up there. That's where I want to go. I have no idea what trail I need to take or whatever, but I just want to be there. People who want to be entrepreneurial and have this passion to do something specific that is burning inside of them, and they feel like every day they don't do that, it's killing them. Those people should do it. I think the people who have an inkling that they should work for themselves, but they don't know what they want to do, like, it's hard enough if you know what you want to do. Those people, I would suggest, why don't you go learn from the best people that you can learn from, gain some experience, learn from their mistakes, figure out what it is, and then you can have that moment. But I know a lot of people, there's a kind of like a WANTrepreneur segment. They just want to be entrepreneurs. It's hard enough when you have a great idea and know what it is. One of the podcasts I love is How I Built This. And I like it because you actually hear all the dark, difficult moments of these success stories. And if you don't have a burning desire to see that thing through for an end, you will quit when it gets hard, because it gets really hard at one or more times. Some people just want to be on the path, but I can tell they're not ready for it when they want to understand every leg of the journey mapped out before the journey has started. But those people to me are just too logically and process oriented to be disruptive to something. They need too high a degree of certainty. I think one of the defining characteristics of an entrepreneur is that they are very comfortable with uncertainty. I just remember talking years ago to a friend. We just kind of deconstructing. Well, when you started the business, did you know exactly this was going this and this? And I was like, no,
Of
like
course
you
not.
can't. If you need that level of clarity, you won't be right. And then you'll probably be even more screwed up because you'll be thrown off your path after 5 minutes. But if you need that much clarity and certainty and otherwise, this is not the right journey for you. There's actually a lot of good roles for people inside organizations, kind of an intrapreneur, to have the safety and security of an organization and the paycheck, but to help push new things forward and otherwise. I think there's a big difference between an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur, though.
I love that. Acceleration Partners, it's the embodiment of your entrepreneurship. But a year after you started the company, you had a health scare and it prompted you to start making some changes. Can you share a little with us?
It was 2009. For a lot of people that have been through 10 years of great economy or otherwise, this was like COVID, but times two or three. There were no winners in 2008, 2009. There was so much leverage that pretty much the whole economy was kind of in a tailspin. I had started the business. We were in the middle of sort of building a house. I had just had my third kid. We were living with my parents while we were building this house in the middle of a recession. And I was working like crazy. My grandmother had passed away. Started having one cup of coffee, two cups of coffee. Basically, one day my heart was just racing. And I just felt it like kind of more and more. And then so you go Google stuff and my arm was sort of tingling. And then you read all this stuff and then it becomes talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I ended up like, I'm sort of the person who I would drive myself to the hospital for surgery. Suddenly, like I was having a hard time breathing. I was in the kitchen. I called my wife. I was like, you got to come home. And I was like, I think I'm having a heart attack. And I just collapsed on the kitchen floor, called an ambulance. By the time I was in the ambulance to the hospital, I was like, all right, I think I'm going to be okay. I don't know what the damage is. It was just a massive panic attack, which basically mimics a heart attack. And so I feel like I got a free warning sign. I know a lot of people who that story's been it for them or it's been real. So I actually, if I look up there, I still the medical bracelet still up there on my desk from that. But I think that was a very important wake up call for me on sort of health and balance and stress and that you just can't work yourself to death out of it. And I started running. I never really run before. I hated it. I still don't like running. I love how I feel after running 5 miles, but I will listen to a podcast or whatever. I'll do whatever I can to get through those 5 miles because I don't love it, but I know that it works well. I got back into yoga, less alcohol, one coffee in the morning. And I subsequently noticed I go through a phase where I might have like a mild panic attack or two, but then it became where I could actually tell that it was coming or tell that it was a stressful period and meditation and stuff like that and sort of unwind it. So it's just become much more in tune, but just made me take sort of health and well-being a lot more seriously.
Wow, that's powerful. Those are scary moments.
Yeah, my 6-year-old son, who's now 12, was right in front of me in the kitchen when I collapsed. And I literally remember thinking, like, is this the last thing I am literally going to see? Is like him staring at me and collapsing. And that was not a pleasant memory that I wanted to go out on.
It's not what you want. No. Out of that, you began making some changes to your own lifestyle. But beyond that, the company was continuing to flourish. And I know one of the things that really struck me, the more I read about the company, the more I read about the culture and how much intention you put into the building of the culture within the organization. You talk about communication and you begin this process of weekly emails to the team.
Yeah.
Share some of that with us.
My understanding from everyone, culture was just all this Dilbert stuff that people wrote on their wall in their office that they didn't actually behave like that I saw in all these clients that I would go to. But when we started building the company, I was reluctant to even build it because I was like, I don't want to be that company I didn't like working for. And so we had a conscious approach of how we were going to do business, what we were going to do differently, how we were going to sort of treat people and say, look, we weren't venture backed or anything. So there wasn't some like ends justifies the means where I'm willing to do whatever it takes because I'm going to sell it one day. And I just was like, I need to like coming to work every day. So every time we approached something and there was a traditional way of doing, like our talent was really spread out. Like let's try being remote.
Mm.
This is 12 years ago when there was no Zoom. This was crazy. No one was doing this, but people seem to work really hard. They like the flexibility. Let's do that. As soon as we started building the company and people would give 2 weeks notice and the type of culture we were building, I was like, 2 weeks notice sucks. This is a really dumb old school system. Let's change this. Let's say, look, if you want to leave, just tell us. We'll let you work here. We'll give you a couple months. Like, let's not all end a relationship with a lie. Like, we won't fire you. And if you come to us and have a discussion, we will not ask you to leave. No one will walk to the door. And in return, like, ask for honesty. And like, we're in a client service business. So let's see if we can get better outcomes. So we haven't perfected that, but I think we have a really good alumni program and we've tried to change the whole conversation. I did a TEDx talk about how people leave organizations. We ended up winning 25 Best Places to Work awards, despite having no place to work, is one of the awards said. And we just tried to do things differently with it, saying in the leadership team, saying, what kind of company do we want to work at every day? And we're not for everyone. We're not pretending that, but we can have open conversations and figure these things out. So there was no doing it to get to someplace. We wanted to wake up every day, like the company we were working at. I paraphrase the sort of Gandhi thing. I think a good culture is what when you think, say, and do are all aligned. So like it's really exhausting for me to have one set of beliefs, talk about another thing, and then another set of actions. It's much easier to say to everyone, look, this is what we believe in. Doesn't have to be what you believe in, but this is what we believe in. What comes out of our mouth is what we actually believe in. And then our policies support that. It's not for everyone. It's for about 2% of the population. And we've figured out the 2% that work really well. But part of this journey you alluded to before was I went to a leadership training, started focusing on my morning routine. One of the things was about reading something positive. You know, we were given some kind of quote books and stuff. It wasn't my sort of positive rainbow and unicorny stuff. So I decided to combine those things. I had some stories and some quotes, and I started sharing this Friday inspiration note with the team, which would ultimately became called capacity building in my book. But it was just about challenge them about some area they could get better. It wasn't really about our company. We were 40 people. We were all remote at the time. I didn't think anyone was reading it. But then I did start getting notes back 5 or 6 weeks later from people saying, I really like this. Thanks. Or I went up and signed up for this. Or I've been sharing this with my husband. He's been sharing with his company. Or I shared this with my brother. Or it was clearly getting out of the company. I shared it with a few CEOs. I let people sign up for it. And I threw a couple hundred people on the list. And I figured I'd get take me off this, unsubscribe. Actually, I got the same feedback. People started sharing it. I've written it for 6 years. It's called Friday Forward now. And there's about 200,000 people in 60 countries that get that note every Friday morning.
That's incredible. And the notes, as I've read them, they're very aspirational. You're sharing some of you, some of what you're learning, but you're also encouraging and challenging others.
It's more of like spicy chicken soup for the soul. It is something a little aspirational, but it also pushes people out of the comfort zone. It's not a rainbow and unicorn type email. Some of them ask sort of difficult Socratic questions at the end. And there are issues that, frankly, like that I'm interested in, but until I spend an hour or two with it, I haven't totally formulated a framework or how to think about it. But it's really interesting how it's spread. And I probably hear from 25 to 50 people a week from all around the world. Like I've gotten some just credible emails and heard all the places that it's gone, from some program in South Africa to a woman who's isolated part of Australia. It's just been a fascinating journey.
Isn't that the best part of like writing?
Yeah.
You have no idea where it's going to land. And actually, these emails ended up coming together in 2020, became a book.
Actually, there's sort of a prequel thing. So I had all these emails, I had this huge following. I went to all these agents and I said, I want to write this book called Friday Forward. And it'll be a synopsis of all these. At this point, I'm not a known author, and this was 4 or 5 years ago. And they said, it's great. We'd love for writing, but no one buys these collaboration books. And I heard that 4 or 5 times. And then one agent who had just come out of publishing said, I love these Friday Forward stories, but what's the story behind Friday Forward? I think there's a story here. So basically, I started thinking, well, what are the lessons? What are the sort of groupings of this stuff? And why did this sort of change my life? Why was it impacting people I didn't know? How are we kind of developing people in our company? And it all came back to the same 4 elements of capacity building. And I realized the stories all fell into these 4 realms. And so I fought with about a year. I got that framework. I rewrote the book, Elevate. I launched that and it became a bestseller. And then as Friday Forward grew and Elevate and that whole capacity building framework, I actually went back to my publisher and said, all right, now I want to dust off the Friday Forward book. What I want to do is I want to now implicitly tie all the stories in 4 sections to the capacity building framework. So that Elevate is like the framework, summarizes all the key concepts and ideas. But some people like just reading the stories and getting the direct ideas for themselves. So sometimes it's just timing. So the book that was sort of rejected came out in 2020, and it's kind of a complement to Elevate. It's written in the same order. It's 52 weeks, but the first 18 are spiritual capacity, then intellectual, physical, and emotional. So it sort of follows the same template.
The four realms, right? Now, give me your favorite lesson that you think is taught there that maybe, and it's your favorite because it impacted you, or maybe it's because of the way it's impacted others. Is there a particular lesson?
One that I like writing about and that comes out a lot is sort of this myth of the overnight success. I love the story of a Jim Carrey or an Ed Sheeran, or just like Ed Sheeran is a unbelievably, and I probably like his story. Look, if you hear the guy sing, play, talent off the charts, but there's plenty of people with musical talent. They just don't get discovered. Even with that level of talent,
Hmm.
people tend to ascribe their own success to intelligence and other people's to luck. I think as a general, or timing. He just, from 16, this was his goal. He committed. He basically made himself homeless for 2 years. He slept on sofas. He played gigs. He handed out CDs. That didn't work in London. Got a one-way ticket to couch surf in LA. Ended up on someone's couch who did a show for Jamie Foxx and said, you should listen to this kid. And, now it all looks super easy. But the difference between him and the other equally talented people who weren't successful was how much he fought for it for so long. So I really like debunking the myth of the overnight success, because I think every story where someone got rich overnight and whatever, every time I actually find the story, it's not the true story that the market is telling.
Well, and that's just as true for you. It's easy to look and say, my gosh, look at Acceleration Partners. Look at the size, 200. Boy, I mean, boy, this is just what a dream. I mean, you have that amazing background. But the thing that's so beautiful about it is once you get a chance to kind of peel back the onion and understand what it is that it really took and the challenges.
Well, look, I'm 45 now, I think. I used to think people were lying when they stopped, didn't get their age right. And then I realized you just stop really counting at a point, because it's not. But if you were to read my bio and all of those things in that bio, other than starting the business, 95% of that stuff would have been in the last 6 years. It would have been after that key leadership inflection point, after I figured out my core values, after I decided to realign everything. I'm not saying I was homeless and not doing some good stuff before then, but that was a conscious decision to make some real changes and to take it to the next level. So I think those inflection points exist for all of us. And that's when I decided what specifically I was going to fight for and what I wanted to do.
I love it. You know, people define their collection of independent contractors who work for them and who are ready to leave the second they get a 25-cent raise. They call that collection of people a team because it sounds good. But the truth is, real teams are constructed around a series of circumstances. And there's a bridge that has to be crossed in order for that collection to become a team. If you were counseling one of those companies you serve about building a better team, what are some of the lessons? What are some of the things they need to do or be thinking of in order to take that independent group of contributors and actually get them to begin working together more interconnectedly?
Yeah. And this is where I think the sports analogies just align perfectly the business analogy. And I think, again, sports leaders are often better at some of this stuff. Like some people call it people in their business, we're a family. I'm like, I think it's really dangerous to say that, because some people, the drunk uncle at the wedding, no one tells them to stop being so handsy. Like that's not what you're trying to do. I thought Patty McCord nailed this at Netflix. We're a high performing team. If you are 1 for 10, 3 games in a row, you're going to get benched because you're hurting the team. That's the difference between team and family. So I would set a clear vision and values. So like, what is the higher order principle that the team is working towards? And you think some of the best leaders on this, look, Jimmy V did this with, his team is championship year. It came out after the Celtics won the championship that Doc Rivers put $10,000 in the ceiling in Los Angeles and said, if you guys want your money back, you're going to have to get here in the playoffs. These stories come out afterwards, but really unifying visions of where you want to go. I think you then want to coach each person to help them increase their capacity and be the best contributor they can be. But then the key point is like the team has to be greater than the sum of the parts. look, in sport, there's a championship or whatever, but there's something that they have to be working for where they believe that not dribbling the ball the whole game hurts the team and doesn't get them to the goal.
It's funny. You and I have had the chance. We've talked about Coach K at Duke. A story along those lines. A few years ago, they won the national championship, beat Wisconsin. They only had 8 players, but at the beginning of the tournament, he took one basketball and he had them write on the basketball someone they were playing that championship tournament for. Could be 2 or 3 names, whatever it was, but it was, who are you playing for?
Yeah, for.
And they traveled with the basketball at every locker room that they went to, so that every player had to sit and look and remember, that's who I'm playing for. And at the end, when they won the championship, they actually had everybody autographed them and they sent them to each one of the people whose names and said, we won this championship for you.
Has someone ever collected any of these stories? Seems like it could be a good little book.
It's funny, as I'm listening to you and you who are doing this, I'm sitting there going, you're right, book. I got to write this down. Good idea.
I've heard some really, again, I'm sure there are hundreds where it didn't work out, but some of the commitment to these things, like the Doc Rivers money in the ceiling.
Yeah,
that was a long play.
Exactly. And hoping that no janitor got there between now and then.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that idea. And those are, in fact, really great lessons. So just like competing in sports, working to push your limits in business is probably real for you today. What's next for you?
Yeah, look, we partnered with a private equity firm last year and have a really exciting plan to build kind of global partner marketing agency, and are looking at all the pieces that we need to either buy or build and to fit into that. So I'm spending a lot of time on that. I like the new stuff. So I have a great number 2, kind of runs the business day to day, allows me to like dive in like that. I've been talking to companies each week, learning industries that I don't understand that we want to be in. I'm focused on that. I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to try to not release a book in the next year, since I ended up squeezing the extra virtual teams one in because just the world needed it. And I was getting asked about it a lot. I haven't discussed this publicly, but the next book, it'll be basically Elevate for Teams. What are the capacity building framework applied to? Really, Elevate was about applying it to yourself and a little bit about the team, but how do you apply that same framework to building a team?
I love that. You also have a podcast, the same name, Elevate.
Yeah.
Why did you start podcasting, and what's the thing you've learned most while doing so?
I did it because it sort of fulfills my purpose. Or my purpose is to share ideas that help people and organizations grow. That's become my sort of unifying thing. And so to a lot of these things, like in the company, when I figure out how to do remote work, like I inherently want to like teach it or help other people do it. It's not something that wants to be a secret. So I realized the podcast would be a great way to share ideas and also like learn a lot of new stuff. I mean, some of the conversations I've had, I'm sure you feel like just amazing access to talk to people who are best in class in their field. And it's been great. So I'll continue to do that. I think it's actually probably may even narrow it down a little bit. I think we realize too, like, a lot of people are jumped into podcasting and then they realize it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
So making sure it's high quality, making sure it's adding value.
I love that. It's been a pleasure listening to your podcast. It's been an even greater gift to have you with us today. I can't thank you enough for being a corporate competitor.
Thank you, Don.
If you love this conversation, check out episode 40 with Disney CEO Bob Chapek. The theme of hard work and willpower is evident throughout. Looking back at my notes from today's interview with Bob Glazer, I wanted to emphasize this line from Bob. People tend to attribute their own success to intelligence and other people's success to luck and timing. But the difference between those who succeed and other equally talented people who don't succeed usually comes down to who fights the hardest for the longest. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir.
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. we are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.